Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to agree with the expression of concern that our Chairman Ryan has made concerning the growth of our debt, and as well to agree with the need for us to ferret out every inefficiency in spending we can find, and indeed to make some cuts in spending even of programs that are performing well because of the size of that debt. The concern that I have, and I'm not asking you to take sides with reference to that concern, is the overly narrow focus of the chairman's approach to our debt problem. And let me ask you if it is not true that unpaid for direct expenditures and unpaid for tax expenditures have the very same effect on the size of our national debt.
Certainly, Congressman, $1 of extra spending and
a dollar of lost revenue,
just as $1 of lost revenue widens deficit
and
by
indeed,
$1.
in terms of the size of what's been left off the table by the chairman, the size of total tax expenditures each year, most observers have estimated rival the total amount of direct discretionary expenditures. Isn't that correct?
I think that's right.
It's a
Estimating the
sizable
total
amount.
effect of tax expenditures is difficult because of interactions among them and other things.
Exactly. But
estimates
both
that
are big.
I've seen suggest that that is a very large number.
And so really when we make decisions about how we're going to deal with this debt, one of the things we can do is to cut direct spending. We can say, you know, families are just going to have to fend for themselves. We're going to cut the budget of law enforcement with regard to the Wall Street banks, with regard to the Wall Street security companies, with regard to the health insurance monopolies. We'd like to do something about that a little bit, but we just can't afford to do it anymore. And we can't afford clean air and clean water. We don't want as much environmental law enforcement as we've had. Let's cut that by $4 billion a year. And that might be one way to address the deficit. But can't we achieve the very same thing if we conclude that a provision in our tax laws that allows Wall Street financial enterprises to enjoy preferential treatment on some of their financing operations abroad and takes $4 billion a year, by closing that tax loophole, wouldn't it have the same effect on the deficit?
Dollar for dollar.
Dollar for dollar.
Yes, Congressman.
And the same thing with reference to cancer research, with reference to scientific research that might spur additional job growth. If we cut that by $500 million a year, that will help us solve the deficit, but perhaps with some very negative effects. Or we could eliminate the $500 million a year in what's called the look-through rule that advantages some multinationals in their interest, rents, and royalties that they earn abroad, and it'll have the same effect on the deficit. It is a choice that we need to make. Would we rather continue to advantage these foreign operations, some of which may actually encourage the export of American jobs overseas, or do we think it's better to cut cancer research and cut scientific research? That's really the choice the committee has to make rather than you, right?
Yes, Congressman.
And that's the problem with the narrow focus that the chairman and the Republican majority have brought to this hearing today. They only want to look at half the problem. And I believe we need to look at all of the expenditures, and especially the many tax advantages, tax preferences, exemptions that powerful lobbyists with their string of limousines up here have been able to get into our tax code. And that's not being done by this hyper-narrow focus that the majority has in this budget process. Now let me ask you about another aspect, and that's your estimates on job creation. You analyzed last year what would be the most effective ways to encourage job growth in our policies. And isn't it correct that one of the least efficient ways to encourage job growth is to extend permanently the Bush-Cheney tax breaks for the wealthiest people in our society?
Congressman, we did estimate that extending the across-the-board extension of the 2001-2003 tax cuts would have a low bang for the buck.
Right.
There's no way wider deficit.
Your conclusions were the same as almost every expert who's ever come before this committee, Republican or Democrat, that those tax cuts won't pay for themselves, that they will add significantly to the deficit, that they are an inefficient way to create job growth. If the objective is to encourage more job growth than what you have predicted, extending the Bush tax cuts permanently for the wealthiest in our society is the wrong way to go. Thank you.